Muslims online make this argument constantly. If Christians criticize Muhammad marrying Aisha young, then Christians can't complain because Mary was supposedly 12 years old. You've probably seen it everywhere: TikTok, debates, comment sections. But here's what most people don't know. The Bible never tells us Mary's age, not once. So where is this claim actually coming from? Did Christians historically believe Mary was a child bride? And is this really comparable to Aisha in Islamic tradition? Because once you actually examine the historical sources, the comparison starts breaking down very quickly. The first thing we need to separate is this. There's a huge difference between the Bible, church tradition, apocryphal writings, and authoritative scripture. And online debates constantly blur those categories together. The age of Mary is never mentioned anywhere in the Bible. Read Luke 1. Read Matthew 1. You'll find the Annunciation, Joseph and Mary's betrothal, the birth narrative, but no age is ever given. Not once. So when people confidently say Christians believe Mary was 12, that claim is already misleading, because it doesn't come from Scripture. It comes from a later document called the Protoevangelium of James, sometimes called the Infancy Gospel of James. And this is the part almost nobody online explains. The Protoevangelium of James was written sometime in the 2nd century. That means it comes after the New Testament writings. And over time, church leaders and councils rejected it as authoritative scripture. Now this part matters a lot. Christians recognized a distinction between historically interesting traditions and inspired scripture. But many Muslims online treat this apocryphal text like it functions the same way Sahih Hadith function in Islam. Historically, that comparison doesn't work. Hadith are not random stories in Islam. In mainstream Sunni Islam, Sahih collections are treated as foundational sources for Muhammad's example and teachings. That's why Muslims regularly quote Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim when discussing Muhammad's life. The broader church never accepted the Protoevangelium of James as scripture. Those are completely different authority structures. And that's where the entire comparison starts falling apart. Now here's where things get really interesting, because most people quoting this source have never actually read it. In the Protoevangelium of James, Mary is presented as being in the temple at age 12 before being entrusted to Joseph's care. But that is not when Jesus is conceived. The story continues forward, and later interpretations connected to the narrative place her older by the time of the Annunciation. But here's the even bigger problem. The source does not even describe a normal marriage. Joseph is portrayed more like an elderly guardian or protector. In fact, the text portrays Joseph objecting because he is already an old man with children, and the narrative strongly emphasizes Mary's perpetual virginity. Joseph is even depicted as shocked when Mary becomes pregnant because the story is not presenting a normal, consummated relationship. So think about what's happening here. Muslims are being asked to defend narrations from collections they still call authentic by appealing to a Christian source the broader church rejected as scripture. And even that rejected source does not describe the kind of relationship they're trying to compare to Aisha. Historically, that's a major problem for the argument. Now compare that with Aisha's age in Islamic sources. For example, Sahih al-Bukhari 5134 and Sahih Muslim 1422 both contain narrations describing Aisha being young at marriage and 9 at consummation. And again, the issue here is not simply ancient people married younger. The issue is authority, because these narrations appear in major Sunni Hadith collections treated as authentic within mainstream Islam. That is completely different from Christians discussing a later rejected apocryphal tradition. Those are not historically equivalent categories. Now, to be fair, people in the ancient world often married younger than they do today. That part is historically true. But internet discussions massively exaggerate this issue. You'll often hear claims like, girls were commonly married at 9 or 10. But many historians argue that first marriages in Jewish society were often later than internet discussions claim, commonly in the mid to late teenage years. So the confident statement, Mary was definitely 12, simply isn't supported by strong historical evidence. At best, it's speculation built on a non-canonical source Christians never treated as scripture. And honestly, this is usually where the real issue appears. Because the goal of this argument is rarely, let's carefully examine ancient history. The goal is usually, if Muhammad did it, then everybody else did too. But that only works if the evidence is actually comparable. And historically, it isn't. Christians are not required to defend every later apocryphal story ever written. Muslims, however, still have to address the fact that Aisha's age appears repeatedly in major Sunni Hadith collections treated as authoritative within mainstream Islam. That's the actual historical distinction. And appealing to rejected Christian writings doesn't remove that tension, it just changes the subject. The Bible never tells us Mary's age. The claim that she was 12 comes from a later apocryphal source the broader church never accepted as scripture. And even that source does not describe the kind of relationship Muslims are trying to compare to Aisha. So, historically, the comparison breaks down textually, structurally, and historically. Sources matter. Context matters. Authority matters. Because when those distinctions disappear, people can make almost anything sound equivalent. Check the evidence. Read it in context. Then decide. If you're ready to learn, grow, and speak truth in love, join us, subscribe now. The conversation starts here.